Hey guys, good evening. Folks, I hope you're all just waiting for you. So, probably you can see some questions until the others come. People are joining, then just do stuff. So, today we're gonna see the romantic age, but while others are joining, try answering some questions. For example, who wrote Deserted Village? Who wrote Deserted Village? Some questions like that. Try answering them. Which country? And also, who wrote The Age of Enlightenment? Enlightenment. Who then was Adam Smith? The Wealth of Nations published. So while others are coming, you can try answering these questions. We'll see for a minute, then we will just go on. Okay. So, who wrote Deserted Village? Robert Burns belongs to which country? Who wrote The Age of Enlightenment? And when was Adam Smith's work, Wealth of Nations, published? These are the questions. Try answering them. Okay, I think we can proceed. Others one by one they will join. Today we're gonna talk about romantic age. Okay, we will divide romantic age into two parts. One is part one and part two, and I think two sessions should be enough. Today, 45 minutes, we'll talk about romantic age and why it's important. In the previous age, no, it was Augustine age, right? It was more about they follow the classical rules as we have seen in last class. So, in romantic age, basically, it's just an antithesis of the old age. So, in this age, you can see that they are breaking rules, they are following their own writing. It's more of what to say, emotionally driven age than the previous age. The previous age was reason, but here it's more of an emotion. So that is what romantic age is all about. But right after Elizabethan age, you see something flourishing, something beautiful in romantic age. Okay, so let's just talk about this age for a minute. Some history. Okay, this age can also be called as the age of revolution. Why it's called as age of revolution is pretty simple. First and foremost, there were two revolutions going on. One was the French Revolution, another was the American Revolution. This is the reason why it's called as, another name we could give it is age of revolution. Okay, so a little bit of French Revolution is needed. Okay, you have to know a little bit of it so that you can understand what's going on here, right? So in French Revolution, what has happened was the basic idea was the rich were getting richer, the poor were kept the same. So that's basic idea of French Revolution. What happened? The monarch, the rich people, the guys who owned everything, the aristocrats, they are having a great time while poor people were taxed. The agriculture crops did not yield properly. There was so much of suffering there. There were in slums and all these things. So all the people, the French people, that is the not so rich people, right? The lower category, the laborers, they all fought against the system. They overthrew Louis the 16, I guess. Okay, he was thrown out of the throne and he was executed finally. And this was when French Revolution was like one of the great incidents in European history, right? It inspired a lot of books, and one of the books you should remember is Dickens' Tale of Two Cities. Okay, um, where it talks about all these things, right? There are many novels which are kind of basis of French Revolution. And one thing you can understand is that French Revolution, no, it was not only for France; it was also about the American Revolution in a way. Seeing this as a cue, they also another reason they fought. No, another reason the French Revolution became so great was that the people of France thought the French involvement in the American Revolution was too much. Okay, they thought the French government were involving themselves too much with the American Revolution. But eventually, what happened was until Napoleon came out, it was a great thing, and you might have read about this. Okay, so it began in 1789 and it ended in the late 1790s. So these are the years you should be careful with. Okay, so it started this time and it ended this time. Fine. Uh, I mean, ended in the late 1790s with the ascent of Napoleon Bonaparte. When Napoleon Bonaparte came out, the French Revolution came to a kind of a stop. But what? The old feudal system, the monarchy, the feudal system all came to an end. Now, this is one part of the land, okay? The French Revolution was going on, but the influence obviously went to Britain, right? So we already know literature is life plus culture and all these things is lit, right? So what happens? immediately the literature, the culture, the politics in Britain is all influenced by French kind of thing, right? From France, all these things started moving to Britain. So that's why these romantics, no, they were charged with kind of we want freedom, we want to be alive, we want to do something great. So the French influenced a lot of the British. Okay, so you can see the works like Dickens' Tale of Cities. Another thing you can see is the famous writer Victor Hugo's the what is that called? The famous novels, right? The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And all these novels are some kind of resemblance of French Revolution. Okay, so this is kind of the background. Now comes the what to say the title, right? Why is it romantic age? That is very important. Why is it called the romantic age, right? So why? So first and foremost, you should remember that as romantic age, no, this was influenced by the French Revolution, and it also started with liberty, equality, and fraternity. That those were the ideals, right? So the word basically comes from the German poet Friedrich Siegel. Remember his name, okay? Friedrich is given credit for using the term romantic. He was the guy who brought in romantic. So he basically described it as literature depicting emotional matters in imaginative form. That was his idea. So for him, no, literature was depicting emotional matter in imaginative form. So simple, right? All the emotional, even Wordsworth's definition is a spontaneous overflow of powerful emotion, recollection, and tranquility, right? So literature, when it depicts emotional matter, then it's imaginative form. Something that imagination and all these things, that is the word romantic as such, right? So this is kind of the basic background of the Romantic age. Now, the French Revolution was one of the most important things of this age. This influenced the British writers a lot. Now, there are not many writers because all the writers of Romantic age, are well known, and we already know a lot of these guys, right? So you don't need to worry about them a lot. Okay, so first and foremost, we will start with the old poets. We can divide them into old poets and also the new poets. Okay, the old poets, obviously, we will talk about the lake poets. You already know who are the lake poets. So, can I see the answers? Last class, we discussed who are the lake poets. So, if you know the answer, it would be better. Can I see? Can I see some answers? So now, as there are more than 10 people who are joined, so anyone knows who are the lake poets? Yes, very good. Kirti, okay, Coleridge. So that is Wordsworth, Sade, and Coleridge. So they are the lake poets as such. So you're familiar with those people. Now we will see the old poets first, and that this session we'll talk mostly about them, and then in the next session we will talk about the romantic poets. Okay, and as I already mentioned, we are not going in detail, but we are trying to connect it so that when we are doing question paper discussions, we will learn a lot. Okay, so that's the idea. So they are called the first generation romantics. That is Blake, Wordsworth, Coleridge, and Sade. So they are the most important people. Today we're gonna talk about them. Okay. Now all these poets, very important poets. Okay, they're very important. If you want, I think it would be better if you know a lot about them. Yeah, I think it will be better if you know their works, and it would be better if you just read their works. Okay, so we'll see one by one. what they have done and all these things. Now, first writer that we are going to talk about is William Blake. Okay, William Blake, 1757 to 1827. So this is the year. Okay, and one more thing, I probably forgot the year. 1798 to 1837 is the year in which the Romantic Age was going on. Okay, so William Blake, 1757 to 1827 was the year that he came out. Now, what you want to know about William Blake is that William Blake was a fine painter, printer. He's an illustrator and a poet. He's not like one thing alone. He doesn't do he doesn't do sit and do writing alone. He is actually a designer who draws and all these things. His artwork is actually very famous. Okay, so that is William Blake for us. He's a poet and an illustrator. Okay, he's a poet as well as he is an illustrator. Those people who have joined, just you can see it later, but keep the live going on. Okay, so you can reply to our answers, I mean questions and stuff. So what you want to know about William Blake is that he he was kind of a mystic in sense he did not really have like Christian thought ideas and all these things. So mostly whenever you talk about William Blake, no, there is one line you should always remember. In all the net question papers, they kept asking this again and again and again, and that was what he talked about Milton. Okay, what he talked about Milton. So according he said Milton was in the devil's group. He didn't know that, right? So that is a very famous line that he was telling. So be very I mean be aware of the thing. Okay, he's a poet and an illustrator, and his poetical sketches are songs of innocence, okay, and songs of experience, marriage of heaven and earth. Okay, this is where he quoted about Milton. Okay, he said Milton is in the devil's group, devil's party. The verbatim is he belonged to the devil's party. So marriage of heaven and hell. So all these things had poetical. These were all poetical sketches, and you might have read the lamb, the tiger, and all these things. So songs of innocence, it was mostly about childhood, whereas songs of experience was about love and all those things. Okay, so usually what he'll do, no, he'll have some artwork in his book, and then the poetry would occur. So even this idea is still followed, where you can see poetic books with art and lines. So this is kind of followed till this time, right? So after his marriage, he even taught his wife how to do this printing and painting stuff. He was a self like a publisher, completely publishing things. Okay, so he taught them, and they were doing this work, and then he actually created his own mythology, right? He's created his own mythology, which has a name. Okay, it is called the four Zoas, uh, ZOAS, right? Zoas. It was like a mythological thing he created. It's based on that. So what they say is he calls it primeval man, primeval man. Okay, so Albion's four parts or divine energies are called by Blake the Zoas, and his entire mythology is about interaction and their epic struggle to reunite. So everything wants to come together. So their struggle to come together is what his mythology is all about. Okay, so he had four Zoas, and just know them because as far as net is concerned, we will be connecting everything. So we don't need to go through this. I mean, in kind of a very detailed manner. We'll just know this. So first one is Tharmas. That means instinct and strength. Okay, so Tharmas is nothing but instincts and strength. Urizen is intellectual and reason. Luva, love and passion. Las or Urtona, it's imagination. So this work you remember, okay, Las, because using this name he wrote a lot of words. So he wrote Book of Laws. He wrote a work called Book of Laws and many of such things. So remember this word loss or imagination. Okay. So thermos is instinct and strength. Urisin, intellect and reason. Lua is love and passion. So that's easy, right? You can remember Lua, love and reason. So last book of last, remember his book of laws as well. So he has written many more, but remember these works. Okay. And his final work was Book of Revelations. He was working on Book of Revelations, and he also wrote about Milton, and he was trying to draw from Canterbury Tales, Paradise Lost, and all these books. Okay. So there are many illuminated works, okay, of Blake, but his works are basically mythic in nature, mythic as well like mystic kind of spiritual in blended kind of poet he is. Okay, and now here are some of the connections you should make. Okay, so one Canadian, famous Canadian critic who wrote the work called Anatomy of Criticism. Can anyone tell me who is that person? Can anyone guess who wrote Anatomy of Criticism? If you can, anybody answer the question? Any guesses? Any guesses, guys? Okay, I think it'll take a long time. Probably it's because of the lag, right? So that is by whom? Northrop Frye. Okay, it was by Northrop Frye, Anatomy of Criticism. But the key is Northrop Frye wrote a work called Fearful Symmetry. He wrote a work called Fearful Symmetry. Okay, so this work made him very famous because William Blake's work, no, some people could not understand it. One work was difficult, and uh, Northrop Frye explained that poem. He wrote it in Fearful Symmetry. This is when he became very famous. And then he became very famous for writing Anatomy of Criticism, which is mostly about archetypal literature. Okay, so this is how you connect all the things. So you know where. So William Blake comes. You should remember Milton. You should remember Northrop Frye. And from when you talk about Northrop Frye, obviously it goes to archetypal, anatomy of criticism, all that, right? So remember this. So we have seen one poet, that's Blake. So I think it would be right. Yes, Northrop Frye. Very good. So it would be right to ask you a simple question. Who wrote, I mean, Songs of Innocence? Who wrote Songs of Innocence? Yes, 1963 was Fables of Identity. Fearful Symmetry, just check out very well. Okay. Yes, Blake. Good. Krishnamurti, good. Right. So that is about that. So we will just rush with the next one. Okay. William Wordsworth, Lake Poets, the first guy. Okay, we have already seen William Blake. William Wordsworth is pretty simple. You already will be knowing a lot about him, but some kind of history I will tell you. Wordsworth was so inspired. I told that these guys were all inspired by the French Revolution, right? So Wordsworth was so inspired by the French Revolution that he actually moved to France. He took a walking tour there, And that is when we talk about personal life, he had an illegitimate child there, and he left the child, and he came back here, and he settled with his sister Dorothy. Okay, he stayed with his sister Dorothy, and there was Coleridge too living with him, right? So Coleridge was now, you should understand, their lives were not like perfect, right? It's too far away. Now, always when you read about artists and things, um, don't get too close to their personal life, because if you do that, then the work loses its power, and that is one of the things which theorists know, like deconstruction, and all they do is they take the work of Milton, or they take the work of old people, and they find out all the things. So Milton was against women, so they disregarded. They try to find is fault with these guys, but art for art's sake should be our motto when you're studying these guys. So their personal lives won't really matter now. Okay, so what happens is, he comes back and he stays with Coleridge. Coleridge is kind of an opium addict here, so he's having a hard time. And that's when they sit and work on lyrical ballads, where Wordsworth and Coleridge published it together, 1759. But then lyrical ballads came out with a preface. Okay, so that was 1800, so two times. And some of the best work, like Rime of the Ancient Mariner and Tintin Abbey, some of the great works all came from this. Now, there are some famous lines that you should be aware of. You already know those stuff, I suppose. I wandered as a lonely cloud. That comes from the cloud. Some people call it the cloud poem, or some people call it the daffodils. Okay. So other lines are there. Main thing is, child is the father of man, and ode to immortality is one of the great odes. Okay, child is the father of man, ode by Wordsworth. Wordsworth has written so many in that, but only few we would remember: Solitary Reaper, all those works, right? His major works like that, or Tintin Abbey, all those kind of works. And Coleridge, of course, he was more into the supernatural realm. Okay, so and Wordsworth was called nature poet, that you already know. But when we talk about Wordsworth, we have to talk about his understanding of poetry. For him, poetry was, it's supposed to be didactic, okay, and it should be simple. That is, just the way we talk, we have to write to us his understanding, because he thought, if I use too much big words, if the structure is too different, then people will not understand what I've written. But these are all ironic, because when you write poetry itself, structure changes. Without that structural difference, how will we know it's poetry? But his most famous definition is a spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions recollected in tranquility. So that is having two parts: a spontaneous overflow of powerful emotion. Okay, that is, it should come when you see a flower, the word should come, the poetry should come. But he's telling there's a gap, there's a pause. He's telling, yes, it's spontaneous, but it's just in your mental faculty, perhaps. Then you go home, you relax. After maybe some days, you're thinking about the same thing in your mind's eye, and that comes back, and then you start writing it again. That is when spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions pause, recollected in tranquility. Tranquility is like opposite of spontaneous, right? So you're sitting somewhere, and then you see the same daffodils, and the same emotions come now, and then you start writing. So that was it. Of course, there are many critics who don't agree to it, because if you see some of the great writers like William Blake, they were using a rhyming dictionary. These things are all extra information. Okay, they tended to use rhyming dictionaries because it's work of art. When it comes. Okay, but still you need to polish it up. So that's how they work. So lyrical ballads, 1798. Lyrical ballads 1800 was the thing, and lyrical ballads by Sadi also gave some poems to this. Okay, so we have seen Blake, Wordsworth. Then anything extra but Wordsworth would be, uh, of course, he was distraught. He was supporting the French, but after Napoleon came and all the things happened, he was distraught. He didn't like. But what's so funny about this is he was very old. Wordsworth was old, but he outlived all the others. He outlived Shelley, Keats, all those guys because they were all dying in 29 and 26. Uh, like they didn't live up. So Wordsworth overshadowed them. But only his powerful poems are known. Okay, there are some poems which are very bad. Critics have pointed out. It's, every poem is not very good. So you should know that. So we have seen Blake and we have seen Wordsworth. So a simple question to you guys: What do you mean by let's say someone worked along with Blake while making paintings and pictures and illuminations? Who was that? Who was that? Someone was, you know, I've already said this. Yeah, Blake, but who was helping him out? Maybe you came late. His wife was. He taught his wife to paint and draw and things. Okay, so just connect these things. Okay. So I hope you're clear with Wordsworth and also Blake. Let's get into the next one. Coleridge, one of my favorites. Okay, so Coleridge, 1772 to 1834. Now, kind of a background about this dude is Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Okay, he was actually a minister's son of a minister. Okay, and his father died kind of early, and then he went to Oxford. No, Christ College, Cambridge. Okay, he went to Cambridge, Christ College. And one thing you should know about them is that these guys all started a group. Okay, like Panther Crazy. So the spelling is probably wrong. Pantiso. Okay, Pantiso. Panthers Crazy Club. Okay, what they did was they were like establishing their own ideological group. Southey, Coleridge, and all these guys joined together and tried to promote this kind of ideal society. So we already know Coleridge doesn't, his work doesn't exist separately because his most famous works are like in the lyrical ballads, and one such work is Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner is divided into 7 parts. Okay, it's a ballad about a lost sailor who's telling this tale to everybody who's going for, those people who are just walking around for a wedding. He starts like old man with a long grey beard and glittering eye, how wherefore stop thou me? So he starts telling his tale, like great tale. So some of the best lines you would have heard: water, water everywhere, not a single drop to drink, water, water everywhere, all the boats just shrink. Okay, so there are some amazing lines. It beautifully rhymes, and you can see Rhyme of Ancient Mariners' most famous idiom that it brought about was albatross around my neck. Okay, albatross around my neck is very important. So that means he shoots the bird. These people know they are stuck in the water and there's no wind, but then a bird is showing them the way, right? But the the greatest blessing that they had, the bird was showing them the way, but he shoots the bird. So it's like a curse upon them. And finally, they go to the slimy waters. It's all burning up, and the ship is. And he's the only one who had escaped to tell this tale, right? So that is important of albatross around my neck. Now we tell that often as an idiom. So if somebody is helping me but I do something wrong, it's like a curse on me. I can say like albatross around my neck. So just try to connect it. Of course, his most famous other work is Kubla Khan, but it was not written fully. 7 parts it's supposed to have. So usually, how this happened? This story is interesting. That is, he was sleeping, and he had this beautiful dream, and he just woke up and he started writing this, sketching out. But then somebody knocked on his door, and he forgot about this whole thing. It was like about a Chinese emperor. Okay, but here's the funny part of it. He was opium induced, right? He was an opium addict, so that created a lot of fancy, imaginary, wild things in their head. Uh, so this is the dirty side of these guys, right? They were like artistically drugged and stuff. So that should have been the reason. Okay, so opium addicts, imaginary writers, he believed in the supernatural, all these things. Of course, Coleridge and Sade, I said, they started the Pantocracy community. Okay, the community was is proposed a utopian community that would fulfill the idealist goals and revolutionaries without degenerating into violence of terror. They wanted to achieve something. Okay, but uh, this couldn't work out as such. Okay, and he wrote a work called Astra. So it was a poem. Sarah appears in college journals poems as Astra. It's like he just changed the girl's name. Sarah was written as Astra, so he couldn't marry her, I suppose. So that was one of his works, and of course his criticism is important. How the criticism of Wordsworth, we will see criticism separately. That is why I didn't insist on preface. The same way we will see biography separately, but Biographia Literaria is an important work, and he talks about fancy and imagination. Okay, fancy and imagination is an important concept here. They talk about fancy and imagination in this. Okay, so he tells what is that, what is that, and of course, what is so interesting is Coleridge was elected to the Royal Society of Literature, and he died. Okay, after that. So one of the finest creations could be found in Biography Literaria. That is interesting fact. Okay, so we have seen Blake, Wordsworth, and Coleridge. The last one is Robert Southey. There's not much about him. Okay, so you can know. Let me just ask you some questions. So, why is it there were two revolutions which actually was a foundation to Romantic Age? What were the two revolutions? What were the two revolutions which were primary for like this great Romantic Age? Any answers? Yes, the French and the American Revolution. They both are the most important factors here. Okay, so we will see the criticism separately, but we'll try to connect it with everything that we have learned. Okay, so the last one would be Robert Southey. Okay, so this one, he has written a lot. Okay, he was a biographer and all these things, but his work, Vision of Judgment, was one of the most famous works. Okay, this is because he wanted to mark Byron. Byron had written the vision, so he just changed it. Byron had written the vision of judgment, so he wrote a vision of judgment. Okay, a vision of judgment was his work. Okay, and Byron had written he just wanted to mark the things, and then uh, we already saw that in the Edinburgh Review they call these three poets as the Lake poets. All those things we have seen. Okay, so his works, he had written Joan of Arc, an epic poem that you should probably remember. Joan of Arc, an epic poem. Let me just type it out here. An epic poem. And what I found was in some of the question papers they were talking about his biography. He was very good biographer. Life of Nelson, okay, and Life of John Wesley. John of Life of Wesley. Okay, so who's Wesley? He was the beginner of the Methodist movement in Christian thing. Okay, so Life of Wesley, Life of Nelson. He was a very good biographer as well. So remember these things: Vision of Judgment, Joan of Arc, Olympic, biographer, Life of Nelson, Life of Wesley. All these works he wrote. Okay, so that's more or less about Saudi. Okay, and he was not very productive as Wordsworth or Coleridge. There's not much that we need to know. Yes, right. So I hope it's clear for you. The new poets we have to see a lot because we want to see everything that they had done. Everything is important. We will finish in the next class. Okay. So mostly I am planning these classes on Mondays and probably Thursdays and Saturdays. But I'll let you know beforehand. And for the other members, we will be doing paper one sums, and we will also be doing question paper analysis from time to time. Okay. So I hope these things are clear. Let me just ask you certain questions, and you're free to go. Okay. So first thing that I want to ask you guys is um, Wordsworth. Where did he go for a walking tour? Where did he go for the walking tour? Any idea? It's easy, right? He went to France, as I already mentioned. Okay, so these are the things we saw. We saw romantic age, when it started, what do you mean by romance, what are the background factors of it, okay, and we saw who gave this term, Frederick Siegel. He was a German poet, remember, it was a German poet, romantic, and we are seeing the first generation romantics, that is Blake, Wordsworth, Coleridge, and Southey. His works, Songs of Innocence, Songs of Experience, Marriage of Heaven and Hell, New Jerusalem, those works we'll just see that, okay. So he wrote a myth, Book of Laws, and all these things. Then Wordsworth, lyrical ballads, um, Ode to Immortality Ode, Salted Reaper, all those works. Then Coleridge, Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, Kublai Khan, Biography in Literaria. Then Wordsworth preface to, uh, you know, preface to his own poems, that is. Okay. That is Robert Southey, Vision of Judgment, a Vision, Joan of Arc and Epic. As a biographer, he wrote Life of Nelson, Life of Wesley, and stuff. So it's good with that. Okay. So remember all these points. So I hope keep reading, keep practicing. We will see you in the next class. We'll continue with the romantic age, and I will tell the others when we are going to have paper one. We have to see the numbers and stuff. So we'll try to complete it as soon as possible. Okay. Once you go and practice at home, everything is going to be easy. Okay. So thank you guys. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming. Thank you so much. Thank you all.